Greetings, everybody. Welcome on into another edition of Warchant TV. I'm Aslan Hajivandi, joined by Jeff Cameron, wildly popular radio host of the Jeff Cameron Show, 1 to 3 o'clock, Warchant TV, as well as 93.3 FM terrestrial radio here in Tallahassee, and managing editor of the ultimate Seminoles sports source, Warchant.com, Ira Schoffel. Thanks for being here, everybody. Hit the thumbs up, and don't forget, camp right around the corner, quite literally. For only $1, you can get 2 months of full premium access to Warchant.com and all the message boards on the On3 network. You can't reply to all of them, but you can go do some hate watching on Ohio State, Florida, Miami message boards, all for $1, 2 months, FSU1 promo code, use it. Speaking of two, we're here to talk about the guy that was number 2 on the preseason top 40, Ira and Jeff. And Jeff, I think we all kind of know who's going to be number 1. It's an offensively driven game in this day and age. But to see somebody at number 2, for me, somebody that's a little bit homegrown, kind of grassroots, came through the system, has worked his way up. Patrick Payton, for you, when it comes to opportunity and capability, why did you have Patrick so high on your ballot?
Well, partly what you said, we've watched him grow into the player he's become. He's gotten better every year he's been here. He's gotten bigger and stronger every year he's been here. 14 and a half tackles for loss last year. I think the number was 7 sacks, if I remember. I think the year before that, it was 5 sacks. I'm projecting probably another jump for him this year. I think this is a guy who's also matured a lot, not just physically, but emotionally. And he's become quite the leader. And then obviously, I jokingly, tabbed him batted balls Payton some time ago. I've not seen a defensive end with the kind of timing and, intuition on these on pass plays to bat as many balls as he has in a long, long time. So he impacts the game, is my point, on so many levels. Tackles for loss. Again, just the sheer numbers, he's much better against the run than he used to be, and he can get after the passer in addition to batting those balls. So I think Patrick Payton's a complete player. He's a guy that if you project the kind of season we think he'll have, especially if Marvin Jones Jr. on the other side is effective, which we think he will be, he may end up with double-digit sacks this year, and we'll be looking at him maybe going in the first round of the NFL draft.
Ira, how much of what kind of Jeff said in terms of him being a complete player, Patrick Payton, merited him being so high, again, on the Warchant top 40? Number 2 overall. He was number 2 on my ballot. He was number 4 on Jeff's and number 2 on yours, Ira.
Yeah, no, I think that's a big deal. I mean, we always get enamored by, sack numbers. And if when you talk to coaches and when you talk to players or fans that really know the game, we all understand that it's not always all about sacks. And you do have to set the edge sometimes. You do have to be good in run defense. And that's an area where Jared Verse got a lot better during his time at Florida State. And I think Patrick Payton really benefited by being, Robin to Jared Verse's Batman the last couple of years, in the sense that he really saw how important it is to become more physically strong and focus on run defense. And you saw in the spring, Patrick Payton, who's already been at Florida State for 3 years, coming into this offseason, went and put on more weight. I can't remember if it was 10 or 15 more pounds. 15 more pounds this offseason to become that guy, not just a guy who can make plays, rush to the quarterback, but can do it all. And I also think him coming back is a big deal, because if you think about, at the end of last season, when there was all the turmoil about the snub and the bowl and who wasn't playing and who wasn't opting out, and Patrick Payton flirted with the idea of going in the portal. And that would have been devastating for Florida State. But the fact that he stayed, again, tells you that, okay, there's been a commitment to him and he's got a commitment to Florida State. And I think you saw that in the spring. And I think he's been not just a good player. I think he's developed into a leader. And I think he's worthy of being there. It's kind of crazy to think, though, if DJ had not transferred into Florida State, Patrick Payton maybe it was the number 1 player on this list, and I don't know if anybody would have expected that a couple years ago. You think back to when he came in as a string bean. He's become a real defensive end.
For you, Jeff, how surprising is that? I guess how refreshing is that Florida State, it was a 4-star recruit, Patrick Payton, but Florida State went down into Miami, grabbed this prospect. Maybe some would have tabbed him a developmental guy, but they have done that at every single turn, and he's also kind of rose to the occasion and met those standards.
Well, they've done really well with defensive ends across the board, and they've done it every which way you could possibly do it, right? They've tabbed guys out of the portal that they brought in and developed them and brought them to new heights, and got them drafted in the NFL in the first round. And now you have a guy like Patrick Payton, who they recruited out of the high school ranks, and they're going to do that very same thing. They already have a yes from a high-profile defensive end in this upcoming recruiting class. This has become kind of the MO for Florida State, right? These coaches are doing a very good job every aspect of recruiting and developing defensive ends, both in the portal and in the high school ranks now. So it's exciting to me because I think it's a culture discussion, and Patrick Payton is a big part of that. And I'll tell you, I would not have guessed that. I'm not going to besmirch the young man, but he was kind of a hothead and volatile when he first got here. There were days of practice where you thought, man, this is going to be a problem. He would get very emotional and frustrated. And he was kind of we were joking around one day watching practice. I was like, he's like the fight guy. You could just see that he was driven and he was emotional. And now I think he's matured greatly. And I do think he's taken on a role of leadership. And I don't know that I would have tabbed him in that way in the past. And I think it's important for Florida State to show that that's what's possible. If you stay here, you take hard coaching, you put the work in, this is what you can be.
Ira, you mentioned, DJ transferring in, and if not for that, then maybe Patrick Payton's number one on this list. I think some fans might have, if you're not that bona fide first round pick, which, Jared Verse coming out of 2022 and going into last year had all that buzz around him. I'm hoping, I would assume, Patrick's going to get some of that similar, hype, if you will. But him falling number 2 on this list, does that portend to anything for the season? If fans look at this and think a little bit of, well, I love Patrick, but I don't know if he's as dynamic, as explosive as Jared Verse, and that means that maybe this roster will not be nearly as, successful. What would you counter with that sort of argument?
I think part of it is we're so familiar with him. You guys have been talking about how we've watched Patrick Payton grow up, and yeah, he was a 4-star recruit in high school because he was very productive. But when he walked on this campus, he was not ready made to play defensive end. He had a red shirt. And then in that next year, he really kind of emerged as a college football player. But what I would tell people is what's really neat about him is that when you talk to the coaching staff, when you talk to John Papuchis or Mike Norvell or anybody on the staff, the first thing they really talk about with him is his intelligence. And I think when you add in the maturity he has developed, as Jeff said, I think now you're seeing just a much more complete football player. And I think this is going to be a good year for him to kind of emerge from the shadows. When he first got here, obviously Jermaine was the guy. And then the last couple of years with Jared Verse, that's where all the attention's been. I think you're starting to see some of the attention on Patrick Payton that you're talking about. If you look at the EA college football game that's coming out, he's one of the highest rated players in the country on that. When you look at Phil Steele's list of the top defensive ends in the country, Florida State has Patrick Payton and Marvin Jones Jr. both in the top 7, I believe, in the country. So I think that's coming. I think sometimes we as fans and media who cover this team, I think we take Lawrence Toafili for granted. We take Josh Farmer for granted. And I think Patrick Payton, is a guy we probably take a little bit for granted.
Jeff, last thing on the way out, and you can also follow up on this too, Ira. Do you still kind of anticipate Patrick being this well-rounded defensive end, or do you see kind of double-digit sacks, more of a disruptive edge kind of guy going into this money season, if you will?
Yeah, I think he can get double-digit sacks. He's gone up by 2 sacks each year he's been here. If he goes up 2 this year, he'll come up just short of that number. It would be 9. He had 14.5 tackles for loss last year. He's disruptive. He impacts the game in a lot of ways, as we've described. I love that he's put on the extra weight, and he got a lot better against the run last year. That really, really stood out to me when you went back and watched those games. He also started all 14 games for Florida State, so he's incredibly durable. That's the other aspect of him. He's out there all the time. He's just steady. He's not as quick twitchy as Verse was. Very few people are. Obviously, we look at Jared Verse and kind of say he was a freak. Not many people live up to that, but he is really productive, and I think he's a problem because he's long. He's very long. He does a very good job of using that leverage. He can bend. I think he'll be very productive. I think he'll be talked about at the end of the year as a first or second rounder. I do. I think he's that kind of a steady player. He's maybe not this dynamic athlete. He's a very good athlete, but obviously when you start talking about what we saw at Jared Verse, it's hard to compare anybody to him. He was freakishly strong. But Jared Jones, listen to me. Payton is very, 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 I think, productive, and I think he'll be productive again this year.
The one
does he have to hit double digit sort of sacks to, validate us calling him the number 2 most impactful player this coming season?
I think he can get there, and I think he should get there. I mean, especially as many games as you're playing in college football now. If you're a potential first or second round draft pick, if you're a big time defensive end, I don't think it's unreasonable to get to 10 sacks. The other thing I would say is the one little thing about the batted balls, and we love it, and it's I mean, I think he deflected 10 passes. It was the most by anybody in the ACC in like a decade, and most for maybe at Florida State longer than that. So it's a rare trait that he has, and a lot of it is his intelligence and intuition. But also, be committed to the rush sometimes too. You're not batting down passes if you've got your ears pinned back and you're going after the quarterback. So I think maybe a little bit more aggressiveness in that nature wouldn't be a bad thing at times as well.
Patrick Payton getting a little tough love from Ira on the countdown here. I like it.
He's not gonna watch this long. He only watched about the first 5 minutes.
And to Jeff Cameron's point, nobody played more snaps on the defensive line than Patrick Payton last year. No one's played more snaps on the defensive line for Florida State the last 2 years than Patrick Payton. The only player that's played more snaps than Patrick Payton on the defensive line since he got to campus in 2021 is Fabian Lovett. So that just goes to show just how reliable and valuable he is, which helps him become a very valuable part of this team and number 2 on the list of the Warchant top 40. One more player to reveal. These 2 guys on the screen, as well as Corey Clark, and I think Gene Williams are going to talk about that one at some point this week. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe to warchant.com, the ultimate Seminoles sports source. Again, for only $1 for 2 months of access. Promo code FSU1. Ira, Jeff, love seeing your faces and hearing from you. Thanks, guys.